So could somebody tell me the difference between innate and acquired immunity? In general, what's the difference as well?
Innate's there before it's exposed to any pathogens, and acquired is after it's exposed, and then it like absorbs it.
Okay, acquired, you have to be exposed to pathogens. Innate, you have before you're exposed to pathogens. When do you have innate immunity?
When you're born.
Yeah, you have this when you're born, and so you don't have to acquire, you don't have to be exposed to anything. You already have this, which means it's more. What else could we say about innate versus acquired? Yeah, it's unspecific, and so therefore it is more general in terms of providing you protection against any type of bacteria and any type of virus and so on. It doesn't have to be specific. Acquired immunity you get within your lifetime, and you acquire it only after you come into contact with pathogens. And so therefore you have to have exposure to different types of bacteria and viruses and so on, and you build up your immune system against all these different types of bacteria and viruses. So last night's notes was mainly about innate immunity, and so this was the non-specific type of immunity. So what I'd like you to do is I'm going to have you guys make a little concept map about the types of innate immunity. Now first of all, innate immunity, I'm going to have you look, if you have your notes, I'll have you look back out, or maybe you know off the top of your head, but I want you to see innate immunity we could divide based upon what we talked about in our notes it into two categories. So if you can think about what you would divide innate immunity into, if you don't know off the top of your head, look back into your notes. And what we're going to do is the first side of this sheet, this large piece of paper, we're going to devote to just innate immunity. So I gave you a large sheet of paper and had you put innate and acquired immunity. But on this side, we're only going to talk about innate immunity. So therefore, I can take my two categories and go like this from innate. And I don't have to worry about being under acquired, because on this side, we're not going to write anything about acquired. Then, when we learn about acquired, we're going to flip it over and start with the same thing and not really write anything about innate and use a big concept map for acquired immunity. Does that make sense? So therefore, you have enough room. Colby.
I only wrote one name on my sheet, and I just remembered Scott wasn't here. I didn't write his name, and I was going to. So,
Okay, so you want to add somebody?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Give me a second and we'll pull it all out. All right, so figure out what two categories you would put in this. Divide this into and go ahead and then underneath there, what I'd like you to do is give examples of different types of innate immunity that would go under each one of those categories. All right? So we are spatially organizing what was in our notes to see the relationship between them.
Just examples.
Yeah, and so you can describe them if you'd like. All right, so some of them may be self-explanatory, like skin. So, did everybody decide the two categories of innate? Let's just make sure everybody's got that.
Yeah.
What are they?
External.
Yeah, external defenses and internal. So then, So then what you can do is put lines underneath here to give examples of the external defenses and what they are and examples of them. Same thing with internal defenses. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that. Pause the video. So we have skin secretions and mucous membranes for external defenses. Can somebody give me an example of a mucous membrane? Jacob? The mucus in your nose, absolutely. So the purpose of the mucus is kind of thick and sticky, and so therefore the purpose is for those viruses and bacteria and anything else to stick to those mucous membranes before they get inside your body where they could infect cells and therefore have some damage done. All right, so those are our innate defenses for external. Innate defenses for internal. Remember, these are innate, so all of these work equally no matter what bacteria, what virus, and so on. Same thing with our internal defenses that are generic. And so what is one internal defense we have? Julia?
Nature killer cells?
Yeah. So, natural killer cells. It has the name killer in it, so therefore it's going to kill something. Now, one might think for the immune system that it's going to kill your invading bacteria or virus or destroy it, but these cells don't. What do they kill? Grayson?
They kill cancer and cells that are infected with the virus.
Yeah, these guys kill, so they're killing our cells. So they can kill cancer cells or infected cells. So that's unique. These guys are unique in that way, in that they're killing those infected cells. Now there's another type of cell we can add on to here that also kill and destroy. What kind of cell would that be? That's a class of internal defenses.
Phagocytic cells?
Yeah. These guys, this word here, I talked about it in the notes, comes from the word phagocytosis. And phagocytosis is a type of endocytosis that we talked about in our cell chapter. So you have a cell, let's say this is the bacteria. Here's your phagocytic cell that the membrane actually indents around. This is your bacteria. And eventually pinches off and eventually has a vacuole with that bacteria in it. This process is what I just drew here is endocytosis. Phagocytosis is a type of that. Phagocytosis just means what it's bringing in is a solid particle. It's not liquid or something like that. So that's why they call it this. So what type of cell did I talk about in our immune system that does this? What would be an example of that type of cell? The specific type I talked about. Yeah, the macrophage. Sorry, both of you. Raise your hand. These guys, the macrophages, this is a type of, I'll put WBC, that stands for white blood cell. And your book talks about there are actually different types of white blood cells that can do this. There are eosinophils, there's neutrophils, there's dendritic cells, and macrophages. And so this is the one that that we're going to stick with for this part here that's important. We'll talk about dendritic cells when we get to the acquired immunity here. So you have your macrophages. Where would one might find a macrophage? I'm going to go hunting for a macrophage inside your body. Where would you find them, Allie?
They're throughout the lymphatic system.
Yeah, throughout the lymphatic system. So I talked about the lymphatic system, how the macrophages are like your lymph nodes are found in the lymphatic system, and inside those lymph nodes and inside your spleen, which is also part of the lymphatic system, are these macrophages that will do this to and engulf and destroy and kill the foreign particle. Anywhere else that we might find macrophages? Basically in your bloodstream. Yep, we can see them in our bloodstream. And so notice that these two are both destroying. These guys are destroying infected cells. These are destroying the foreign particles. All right, so the foreign organisms that are coming into your body. All right, so that's your second internal defense. Let's go to a third one. It's a third internal defense mechanism that's generic. Grayson? Yeah, proteins. Antimicrobial proteins. And so with this, let me pull up the diagram I have. Let's see if this turned off. Turned off on me. So, what were some of the examples? There's a couple of examples of antimicrobial proteins that I talked about in the notes. One was called some kind of system. Do you remember what that was? Sam? Yeah, it's called the complement system. And so let's write this here. And I want to talk a little bit about that, what that it means. So, the complement system for this. And anybody remember what this does? Causes something to happen in the other cell.
Lysis.
Yeah, it causes lysis in the cell. And so this is, I'm going to put here in parentheses, we'll talk more about it later on in the chapter, but this is this figure right here. This part right here is the complement system. And I'm just going to show you that, but it's figure 4319 in our book. So it causes lysis. Lysis means to cut into split. We talked about this when we talked about osmosis and cells, animal cells exploding. So what basically happens is these proteins puts pores. This is the foreign cell. So let's say this is a bacteria that's invading your body. The complement system can bind to it and cause pores to happen. And what those pores do is allow ions to come into the foreign cell. That increases the solute concentration, which means water will diffuse into the cell, and therefore the cell gets bigger and eventually lyses and explodes. So this one's also killing the foreign cell in a different way by causing lysis. And so that's called your complement system. And then there was one other type of antimicrobial proteins that we talked about. Yeah, interferons. These are, this is a chemical, it's a molecule. What does it do? Right.
It like comes from an infected cell and it bind to a cell that's not infected, and then that cell will not be able to be infected by the virus.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So these guys here, we could say they're released by an infected cell. And I should put virus infected. So the release, so you have a virus infected cell, and how viruses work is that they infect a cell and they basically turn that cell into a virus producing factory, so new viruses leave that cell and go and infect other cells. So a virus infected cell releases this chemical called an interferon, and those interferons bind to all the healthy cells and basically protect those healthy cells from being infected by the virus. So released by the virus infected cell and protects other cells from the virus. That's in a nutshell. And the last defense here, good thing I don't have a lot to write about it, is what? Yeah, the last one is the inflammatory response. And that is back to, let me go back to the picture of that. that was this picture when you have an injury. And so, so this whole process, this picture here, where you have, here's the pinprick, the green guys are the, let's say, bacteria, the pathogen, and so you have a chemical signal. Do you guys remember what the chemical signal is? Or the H? Histamine. So histamine is released. Histamine causes changes in the capillaries at the site of the injury. What happens to the capillaries? They dilate, right? So that's what we see here, which increases blood flow. It also changes the construction of the vessel membrane, where it becomes more leaky, so more porous, where things can diffuse out. So what are those things that are diffusing out? Like we look from this picture to this picture. You have blood clotting elements that are going to help to clot and stop the bleeding at the site. It also is going to cause fluids to come out, which also makes it inflamed. All right, so that's why it swells, because you have an increase in volume. And you also have your phagocytic cells also coming into the area, which then we can see here that are going to work to engulf the bacteria and so on. And so this inflammatory response pulls in these phagocytic cells as well. So those are part of the inflammatory response. And remember, the phagocytic cells, this is generic. So they're showing you in this picture all these like green bacteria, implying that they're all the same. But really, if you have a dirty pin and you got pricked by the pin, you could have lots and lots of different types of bacteria. And so therefore, these macrophages and the phagocytic cells that are coming to the area to engulf the bacteria since it's generic, they will bind to and engulf any type of pathogen. It doesn't matter, and so therefore kind of cleans up that area. And so then what happens is the cells around it, we're going to learn after this unit that the cells around it will start to divide by mitosis and heal that cut, and then you have a nice clean skin, again, with no break in it. Okay? And so that is the inflammatory response. And so I'm not going to write a whole lot about it. I just did it verbally here, but that's 43, figure 43.6. Okay? Any questions on that? All right, so that is innate immunity. So the rest of the time here, we're probably going to, in the chapter, is spent basically on acquired. So acquired, there's a little bit more in depth to it, all right? So there's a lot more to acquired because you have to develop this immune system based upon pathogens that you come into contact with. So we get out of here at what time? 9:11. All right, so you know what I did with, because it's a shortened hour, so I had here working on the second part of the review. Realistically, I realized if I probably did that in the first hour, they realistically weren't going to use the time to work on the review anyway. So what I did is just started the notes, and therefore you can just fast forward to where we left off in the notes, like for your homework, watching the video. Does that make sense? All right. So that way you're doing something. All right. So get out your notes. All right, so this is where we're at. .2. Or you should be at. So this type of thing, what we just did here with the first section, is after we go through things, this is kind of what you should be able to do kind of off the top of your head, all right? You kind of test yourself. So as I said, we're all about now acquired immunity. And so this is the second major kind of defense. So we're going to learn about a few things. some vocabulary in here. An antigen is a foreign molecule that's recognized by lymphocytes and elicits a response for them. So there's two vocabulary words there, antigen and lymphocytes. And then a lymphocyte recognizes and binds to a small portion of the antigen called an epitope. So there's another vocab word. So we have antigen, lymphocytes, and epitope. So, if we look at this picture here, here it says antigen. Notice that an antigen has these protrusions from it, and this one has 3, and notice the different shapes of all 3 of these. These protrusions with the different shapes are called epitopes. And so that's, let me kind of draw another picture to kind of relate it to what we were talking about here, like when we're talking about a bacteria invading your body. So if this is, so this is your bacteria right here. On the surface of the bacteria are molecules that are called antigens. And so I'm going to draw an antigen here. And the antigens have different shapes protruding from it. So I'm going to draw this like this. And then I'll draw it like, so it's like a peak and then a half circle like this. This is on the surface of your bacteria. So then, to show the relationships here, this whole thing off the surface of the bacteria is called an antigen. And then each antigen has different shapes kind of protruding from it, and those are called, what are they called? Epitopes. So in here in green, these guys are epitopes. So epitopes are part of antigens, and they're on the surface of a foreign particle. And it can be on the surface of a bacteria, viruses, even pollen has, like pollen grains from plants have antigens with epitopes on it. Later on in the chapter, we'll talk about how that relates to allergies for people who have allergies and are allergic to pollen of certain plants and so on and so forth. It's because it has these antigens on them. All right? And so this is where we'll stop. So you can fast forward at least a few minutes. Okay?